Today, the United States stands as the undisputed #1 superpower on Earth. But is the American giant cracking from within? To truly understand these modern fractures, we must first look back to the tragic dawn of the 21st century. In September 2001, the American illusion of perfect safety and invincibility was shattered forever. In a coordinated, devastating terrorist attack on home soil, nearly 3,000 innocent lives were tragically lost. The shocking collapse of the Twin Towers in New York left a deep, unhealing wound on the national psyche. However, from the dark ashes of this unprecedented tragedy emerged an incredible, overwhelming sense of national unity. For a brief, powerful moment, deep political divisions completely vanished as all Americans stood fiercely shoulder to shoulder. But this profound collective grief and unity quickly transformed into a fierce, global declaration of war. The United States swiftly launched the massive global war on terror, deploying powerful military forces across the Middle East. What began as a swift, righteous mission for justice soon evolved into grueling, seemingly endless conflicts in Afghanistan and Iraq. These distant, complex wars cost trillions of dollars and thousands of American lives, dragging on for decades without clear victories. Back at home, the initial patriotic unity slowly began to fracture as these foreign interventions lost crucial public support. Simultaneously, the government drastically expanded its domestic surveillance powers, sparking intense national debates about personal freedom versus national security. The invincible superpower was silently bleeding vital resources, and the very first subtle cracks of a deeply divided modern era began to show. Yet, while the military fought endless battles overseas, an entirely different kind of global revolution was quietly brewing right in California. In the early 2000s, a massive technological revolution was rapidly reshaping human existence completely. From small, unassuming garages in Silicon Valley, brilliant innovators built platforms that promised to connect the world. Smartphones and social media quickly became indispensable, creating a booming, unprecedented global digital economy. America was leading this incredible digital frontier, appearing economically invincible and more powerful than ever. But while the digital world was soaring, the physical economy was quietly building a catastrophic bubble. In 2008, reckless subprime lending finally caused the massive housing bubble to violently burst. Historic Wall Street banks collapsed completely overnight, triggering the devastating Great Recession across the entire globe. Millions of hardworking Americans suddenly lost their homes, their life savings, and their jobs in an instant. To prevent a total collapse, the government stepped in and controversially bailed out the massive failing banks. This sparked immense public outrage. For the first time, everyday citizens felt the system was completely rigged. The wealth gap widened drastically. The rich recovered quickly, while the middle class was left desperately struggling. This deep economic trauma planted the seeds of severe distrust in the government and traditional institutions. The American public became increasingly frustrated, searching desperately for someone to blame for their struggles. And right at this vulnerable moment, those same digital platforms, originally designed to connect us, began to slowly transform into powerful, isolating echo chambers that would permanently divide the nation. In the 2010s, a new kind of invisible war began, fought not with bullets, but with complex digital algorithms. Social media platforms soon discovered a dark psychological secret. Anger and fear keep people clicking. Outrage was successfully monetized, turning severe national division into a highly profitable, unstoppable business model. Sensational misinformation spread like wildfire across the digital landscape, easily outpacing the boring truth everywhere. Massive supercomputers continuously fed users content that perfectly confirmed their own pre-existing worst political biases. Soon, these invisible digital echo chambers started to physically tear the real world violently apart. Lifelong neighbors completely stopped talking. Families argued bitterly and disowned each other over dinner tables. The political middle ground, which had held the vast country together for centuries, completely collapsed. People weren't just simply disagreeing on policies anymore. They were living in entirely different realities. The traditional press struggled desperately to keep up, often amplifying the chaos to simply survive. A highly toxic storm of digital polarization swept violently across the entire American continent, unstoppable. Even the highest, most sacred institutions found themselves completely engulfed in this endless outrage cycle. Public trust in the government, the media, and even in each other hit terrifying lows. The world's most powerful nation was slowly but surely cannibalizing its own formidable historic unity. The giant was practically invincible to all outside threats, but left completely vulnerable to itself. By the 2020s, this toxic digital division had completely paralyzed the American political system. Passing essential law became nearly impossible as opposing sides focused entirely on defeating each other. The geographic map itself transformed, with deep red and deep blue states pulling fiercely apart. Even basic, everyday issues transformed into bitter, hostile battlegrounds between neighbors and once close friends. America was no longer a melting pot. It was fracturing into completely isolated cultural islands. Even supreme institutions, once deeply respected by all sides, began to lose their vital credibility. In this hyper-polarized environment, simply agreeing on basic, objective facts became an almost impossible task. This digital fury rapidly spilled onto physical streets, turning neighborhoods into tense arenas of political clashing. The democratic process itself faced deep suspicion as citizens began to question the integrity of their votes. Local town halls and schools turned into bitter battlegrounds, paralyzing the most basic spaces of community life. Under the relentless weight of constant outrage, a profound, heavy sense of national exhaustion began to take hold. The undisputed leader of the free world appeared increasingly exhausted, distracted, and vulnerable to its enemies. While America argued with itself, fierce global rivals silently grew stronger, patiently waiting for their moment. History repeatedly shows us that the absolute greatest empires rarely fall to outside armies. They almost always crumble entirely from within. In 2026, the United States celebrates its 250th birthday, a milestone very few nations ever reach. Fireworks lit the sky on the 4th of July, and just weeks later, the nation also took center stage to co-host the FIFA World Cup. Millions of fans from across the globe gathered in spectacular stadiums, celebrating under the bright American lights. President Trump and First Lady Melania Trump watched the final from the stands, a striking image of the nation's moment in the world spotlight. But behind the fireworks, a hardline America First doctrine had already pulled the superpower into a very real war overseas. Since early 2026, U.S. forces have carried out repeated strikes against Iran after months of collapsed diplomacy spiraled into open conflict. American service members have been killed in the fighting, and global oil prices surged, pushing gas prices back toward $4 a gallon at home. Supporters call it the strongest presidency in decades. Critics warn this hardline approach risks pulling America deeper into conflict abroad. Fiercely divided citizens are now asking, why spend fortunes protecting distant borders while our own communities desperately struggle? As America hesitates, arguing bitterly with itself, ambitious global rivals are rapidly expanding their own power. At home, this same era saw Washington grind to a halt in the longest government shutdown in American history, 43 days over the federal budget. Rising prices at the pump and a distant war became just the latest flashpoints splitting an already divided electorate. The crown of the undisputed superpower is incredibly heavy, and the immense weight is visibly taking its toll. The glittering fireworks of the anniversary in the World Cup briefly masked the ominous, brewing storm clouds of war and division. Whether this hardline approach leads to greater strength or deeper conflict, only time will tell. The next chapter is still being written, and history will be the judge. To answer whether the American giant will crumble, we must look at how it was originally built. This country started as just 13 struggling colonies, daring to challenge the most powerful empire on Earth. They forged a living constitution designed specifically to bend, adapt, and survive through centuries of crisis. It survived a devastating civil war that literally tore it in half, slowly stitching itself back together. It evolved through two horrific world wars, transforming into the ultimate, unstoppable engine of democracy. And it decisively won the Cold War, wielding the overwhelming power of its economy like a weapon. Today, those fierce, toxic divisions seem like they might finally tear the nation apart completely. But the American experiment was specifically designed to be loudly argued over, tested, and constantly repaired. Because ultimate power doesn't rest in the hands of a king, but with we the people. Whether the giant crumbles or rises to entirely new heights, the next chapter of history is entirely up to them. The story of the United States, like all great empires, is still furiously being written today. Thank you for joining us on this incredible 6-part epic journey through United States history. Which fascinating nation should we explore next? Drop your thoughts in the comments and subscribe. Remember, history always has many different angles. Check the description for our sources and stay curious.